city where uniforms can hide intentions and assumptions replace evidence, two officers spotted a red Aston Martin, and behind the wheel, a black man, polished, calm. Too calm, they thought. Must be suspicious. What they didn't know? Darius Cole wasn't just a driver. He was deep cover, Homeland Security, and the operation he'd just completed, it had everything to do with them. They thought they were in control. Instead, they had just revealed themselves to the one man trained to take apart corrupt systems from the inside out, quietly and without warning. Before we dive deeper, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story flips the script even harder. That evening, the city stretched out beneath the last light of day. Wide streets, long shadows, and the slow rhythm of people just trying to make it home after another day of too much work and too little thanks. Darius moved through it all like a whisper, one hand on the wheel of his new red Aston Martin, jazz humming from the speakers, windows cracked just enough to let in the heat of summer. He wasn't headed anywhere specific. After months buried in encrypted systems and ghost files, after long nights where his name didn't exist on any document, this aimless drive was the most real thing he'd felt in a while. The contract was complete. The mission was over. And for the first time in years, his phone wasn't vibrating with someone else's emergency. No briefcase, no earpiece, just a pressed shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a quiet confidence that didn't need to be loud. The car beside him wasn't borrowed, leased, or gifted. It was his, paid in full, a quiet reward for years of invisible work. But the streets changed as he drove, from towers of glass to cracked sidewalks and barbed wire fences. Eyes followed him, some curious, some jealous, a few, sharp with doubt. He felt it. He always did, because no matter how calm his drive or clean his record, a black man behind the wheel of a car like this never moved through certain neighborhoods unnoticed. Still, Darius played it by the book. No speeding, no sudden moves, both hands on the wheel. Turn signals used, every stop, complete. Because he knew, better than most, that people like him don't get second chances when someone's looking for a reason. So when he spotted the black and white cruiser pull in behind him, he didn't tense. He just observed. 2 blocks later, the lights lit up, flashing red and blue. A short burst of the siren, then silence. He pulled over smoothly, turned the jazz down, kept both hands visible. This wasn't his first time doing this dance. 2 officers approached. One older, thick-set, red-faced. The other younger, thinner, already smirking like he'd solved a case no one asked him to. "License and registration," the older one muttered, like it annoyed him to speak at all. Darius nodded. "License is in my wallet, back pocket. Registration's in the glove box," reaching slowly. "Go ahead," the younger one said, shifting his stance to get a better view inside. Darius moved carefully, handed over the documents. The older cop took them, barely glanced at the name, passed them to his partner. "This your car?" the younger asked, still suspicious. "Yes, picked it up yesterday." "Not a lot of cars like this in this part of town," he said, raising an eyebrow. "There are," Darius replied evenly, "when I'm driving them. Just finished a federal contract. Decided to treat myself." The older cop stepped in again. "What kind of contract?" "Cybersecurity, sensitive systems, that's all I can say." But even with all the right answers, none of it landed. Not the tone, not the credentials, not the calm. All they saw was a man who didn't look like he should own that car. "We've had reports of stolen vehicles in the area," the older one said, already signaling the other. "Step out so we can check a few things." "You've got the paperwork," Darius said quietly. "There's nothing stolen here." "That wasn't a request," the younger one snapped, the smirk gone, replaced by that cold edge some men get when they think no one can stop them. Darius looked at them both, jaw set. Then, with slow, deliberate calm, he opened the car door and stepped out. He felt it, the way their posture changed, like something tense just clicked into place. He knew the language of force long before it spoke. He raised his hands, kept every move visible, clear, calm, but not small. "You might want to double-check the registration," he said evenly. "Because what you're doing, this isn't protocol, it's targeting." The older one didn't blink. "Turn around, hands on the hood." Darius paused, not to resist, but just long enough to let them know he saw them. Then he complied. The metal of the car was warm, almost burning. The cuffs clicked tight around his wrists, not enough to injure, just enough to insult. The older cop's hands moved like someone who'd done this too many times to care, efficient, cold, not even bothering to pretend this was about justice. Darius didn't flinch. His back was straight. His silence wasn't weakness, it was control, because he knew resistance would give them what they came for, and he had no intention of playing the part they wrote for him. He looked sideways at their badges, names stitched in place. Kavanaugh, Heller. The connection hit instantly, a file buried in Homeland's internal reports. Seizure patterns, irregular paperwork, flagged behavior, no charges ever stuck. But now the names had faces. "You thought you could talk your way out of this?" Heller muttered, rifling through the console like a man searching for justification. Darius didn't even turn. "I followed every instruction. You had no grounds." Kavanaugh scoffed behind him. "Listen to this guy. Probably rode through college on someone else's dime. Thinks he's too smart to end up here." "I'm not too smart," Darius said, voice low. "I'm too clean." That made Kavanaugh pause, only for a second. Then he stepped closer, voice lower. "Then why do you look like every other punk we've dragged out of a car this week?" There it was, unvarnished. "You're not even trying to hide it," Darius said. "You didn't check the system. You didn't look at the files. You just saw me and made a call." "Paperwork's got holes," Heller said too fast, like a man bluffing mid-hand. "That's on you," Darius replied calmly. "I watched you photograph the VIN, the plates. Even your tow truck got into place before either of you made a call. So either this is your routine, or someone's got you on a payroll." Kavanaugh's jaw clenched. He moved in front of Darius, eyes hard. "What did you just say?" "I said this isn't your game to win," Darius answered. "Not today." Kavanaugh shoved him against the car. Harder. Not to subdue, to punish. But Darius didn't react. His fingers tensed in the cuffs, then relaxed. "Watch your tone," the officer growled. "You think you're better than us?" "I think," Darius said, voice steady, "that I don't deserve to be humiliated on a sidewalk for owning something I earned." Heller let out a humorless laugh. "He really believes he bought this car with some laptop and a LinkedIn account. More like a favor from some agency looking to hit a quota," Kavanaugh added. "You're just a checkmark on someone's list." Darius didn't answer. He'd heard it all before, in different rooms, dressed up in better suits and smoother voices. But the message was always the same, and he'd trained himself to let it bounce off like static. Heller slammed the glove box. "Nothing in here. Guy travels light." "Yeah, well," Kavanaugh muttered. "He's not going anywhere in that." Across the street, a tow truck rolled up. Not rushed, not curious, just expected. The driver didn't say a word as he locked the chain and extended the ramp. The Aston Martin tilted up, red paint catching the evening sun, the sound of the winch dragging it into silence. Snap, snap. Heller was still taking pictures, not for evidence, for inventory. Darius watched his car disappear in the reflection of a storefront window. Not stolen, processed, ready to be erased, flipped, and sold into a new name with clean tags and no questions. Kavanaugh finally uncuffed him. Not rough, but like he didn't want to touch him a second longer than required. "No arrest," he said flatly. "Not today, so maybe next time keep your head down and your car out of this neighborhood." Darius flexed his fingers. Blood rushed back into his palms. He took his time, adjusted his cuffs, straightened his shirt. Then, without looking at either of them, "Clock's ticking, boys." "What was that?" Heller asked. the fake confidence in his voice cracking just slightly. But Darius was already walking away, calm, steady, hands in his pockets, no rush. And once he turned the corner, far from their view, he reached into his sock and pulled out a slim black device, encrypted, secure, silent, and recording. No one had searched for the device hidden on Darius, not that they would have known where to look. It blinked to life in silence. One tap, that was all it took. A signal pulsed through Homeland's shadow network, lighting up an alert buried deep in the Aston Martin's surveillance rig. GPS, audio, and vehicle ID systems all pinged online, bright green across the board. Hundreds of miles away, in a low-lit command room with no official name, a terminal lit up. "He took the bait," a tech muttered, half to himself. The operation had officially begun. Back on the empty street, Darius kept walking. No car, no apology. But there was a flicker of satisfaction in the corners of his eyes. The officers, Kavanaugh and Heller, weren't the target. They were just entry points. What mattered now was how deep the rot went. As twilight dipped behind the skyline, Darius stepped through the steel-reinforced door of Homeland's covert substation, hidden beneath a logistics hub that looked like any other warehouse from the outside. No signs, no logos, no scanners in plain sight, just a blank building that people passed every day without ever noticing. But the camera under the awning recognized him instantly. The door unlocked with a soft hiss, and Darius walked the corridor like he'd done it 100 times. Only this time, something in his stride was different. The suit was gone. In its place, tactical black denim, a field-grade watch, and eyes sharper than usual. He wasn't just clocking in. He was preparing for war. A steel door at the end slid open, revealing a command center that buzzed with low-humming equipment. Walls lined with satellite feeds, intercepted signals, license plate scans, and encrypted chatter. The digital storm was alive. 3 analysts worked in quiet sync, fingers flying, eyes locked on moving data. No one greeted him, but everyone felt the shift in the room the moment he stepped in. "Welcome back," came a voice from the side. Agent Laia Torres stepped out from a shadowed terminal bay, a tablet in one hand, headset slung casually over one shoulder. Her tone carried its usual edge, the one she used when things didn't add up. "You're late," she said, eyes on the screen, where a blinking dot showed the Aston Martin's new location in an impound lot database. "They moved it faster than expected," she added. 10 minutes from stop to toe. Darius dropped his encrypted phone on the desk beside her and headed for the mission board on the far wall. "They didn't follow a single step of protocol," he said, swiping across the digital interface. A map expanded. No plate scan, no radio log. Tow truck was already in position before they even asked for my license. "Didn't even pretend to go by the book," Laia muttered. Darius zoomed in on a corridor of red markers scattered across a tri-county stretch. Each one represented a vehicle, seized under murky circumstances, rerouted through backdoor channels, and quietly vanished from official records. 37 vehicles, he said quietly, all high-end, all drivers either black or Latino, 0 indictments, no charges, just ongoing investigations and vague paperwork. Laia joined him at the board. "And they all end up at the same auction house in Calvert Hills," she said. "Same shell company, same fake registrations, same faces showing up behind the curtain." She flipped her tablet to a looped video, a warehouse entrance swallowing luxury cars that never came back out. "And nobody higher up saw this?" she asked. "They saw it," Darius said. "They just looked the other way, or got paid to." The screen refreshed, satellite feed now showing the Aston Martin arriving at the impound. The tow truck unhooked the car and left without logging a single document. A man in plain clothes approached. No badge, no hesitation. He scanned the vehicle's ID, dropped a clipboard on the dash, and held it long enough to extract full diagnostics through a hidden reader. No cameras, no chain of custody, just erasure. Laia folded her arms, finally turning to face him directly. "And you still want to let it play out?" she asked. Let the car climb the ladder and hope it lands in the right hands? That's the plan, Darius replied. It was the plan 2 months ago, before you let them cuff you in the street. He exhaled through his nose. Not frustration, not rage, something deeper. He didn't blink. They didn't drag me out, he said. I let it happen. You let them? Her voice dropped. I needed to confirm if Kavanaugh and Heller were still active. Now I know. She narrowed her eyes. You're not just tracing stolen cars anymore, Darius. This ring? It's wired straight into Monahan's precinct. He looked at her and nodded once. I know. He's got friends in the courthouse, Laya said quietly. If they find out you're watching, this whole thing vanishes. You vanish. Darius didn't respond right away. He just stared at the screen, at the blinking icon representing his stolen Aston, now deep inside a system designed to erase things without a trace. His face stayed calm, but the silence behind it was storming. My dad drove a Lincoln Town car, he said, almost like he was remembering something too old to be painful. Worked nights at the bottling plant, kept that car until the wheels shook on the freeway. It was his pride, the only thing he ever fully owned. Laya stayed quiet. One night, cops stopped him, Darius continued. Said the car matched a stolen vehicle. He showed his pay stub, license. Didn't matter. They took it anyway, told him to come to court if he wanted it back. What happened? She asked. He never saw it again, Darius said flatly. Couldn't afford the fees. The car was gone in a week. Towed, sold, scrapped or flipped. Who knows? Laya said nothing for a beat longer. So this isn't just about the operation. This was never just about the operation, Darius answered, sharper now. Not for me. The hum of servers filled the silence between them. That steady buzz of cold machines doing work humans wouldn't dare. Hours had passed since the Aston was towed, and now it had moved again. First to the East End impound, then to a different site, listed in city records as a temporary overflow facility. But the building it led to hadn't had a signed-in employee in over a year. The department didn't even exist anymore. The icon on the screen now sat motionless in a wide industrial yard surrounded by chain-link fences, cracked asphalt, and shipping containers. A drone above relayed live footage, confirming what the paperwork tried to hide. 2 black SUVs were parked near the edge of the property, municipal tags, but no fleet registration. In other words, ghosts. Behind Darius, Laya scrubbed through audio logs captured from the Aston's hidden surveillance rig. Most of it was routine, idle talk, mechanical orders, background noise, until one voice cut through, calm, precise, male. 2 days. That's how long I can sit on it, the voice said. Another man answered. Title already moved, buyers ready. That was all. But it was enough. They're fast, Darius muttered, tapping the edge of the screen. Faster than we thought. This isn't just opportunistic theft. This is industrial. Plate data's getting pulled before the stops even happen. Laya nodded slowly. Someone on the inside is feeding them DMV records. That's not beat cop work. It's not even precinct work, Darius said, bringing up a new map. This yard, on paper, it's city-owned. But 6 months ago, the lease transferred to a private security firm. No listed address, no real board. He tapped another window open, pulling a name from the incorporation documents. One name jumped out, one Laya recognized immediately. Wait, that's from the Durango files, she said. Border activity, cartel-linked suspect, Texas corridor. Darius opened the file fully. A photo appeared. Uniformed, smiling, standing behind a podium at a police graduation ceremony. Captain Ree Monahan. Familiar name. Decorated officer, local hero, on camera more than most politicians. But the document said otherwise. 2 years ago, the DEA had flagged his name in a closed memo, one that never reached formal investigation. His signature had appeared on a Porsche requisition order tied to a case where the vehicle was never logged into the impound system. "They buried it," Laya whispered. "Of course they did," Darius said. "He's too valuable. You don't go after someone like him without hard proof." "And now?" she asked. "Now," Darius replied. "We've got movement." The Aston's GPS pinged again. Just a shift, a few meters at most, but enough to suggest it had been rolled, not abandoned, prepared. The drone feed showed a warehouse door slide open. 3 men entered, 2 in plain clothes. The third wore a City Tow Division jacket, but the badge, too new. No match in employee databases. "They're not impound staff," Darius said. "They're handlers." "We've got 36 hours, Laya said, "before that car's off the grid." Darius nodded. "Let it move." "What?" she frowned. "Let it go?" "That's the point," he said. "They'll push it through the shell company. And on the other side, that's the real buyer. That's who we want." "And what if it crosses the border?" she asked. "What if it gets stripped in Newark or dumped in a port?" "It won't," he said. "They've gone quiet, which means it's marked, not for scrap, for someone. This car is a message, or a delivery." He tapped open a dark web auction site. One recent listing flickered at the top. 2024, Aston Martin, DB11. Cherry red, no reserve, clean papers, verified. And in the corner, a name tied to a foreign shell corporation, one Darius had seen before. He didn't smile, but his eyes narrowed. They were getting close. The buyer's data was encrypted. Of course it was, hidden behind a numbered shell out of Panama. But Darius had seen this signature before. The formatting, the handler tags, the phrasing in the listing, all of it matched the same group they'd been tracking for nearly a year. Only this time the car wasn't random. It was his. He followed the auction trail deeper into the blockchain log, scrolling through proxy routes and payment masks until one transaction caught his eye. "I've got a name," he said quietly, his voice tight. One of the payments for the Aston came from a proxy flagged in the Raptor Cell briefings last year. Laya's eyes snapped to the screen. That file was black access, restricted. Only 3 people pulled that string. Darius didn't say anything, just opened the access logs. There were only 2 names, his and hers. Laya stared, blinking once, then again, slower this time. "That's not possible," she said. "I never opened Raptor Cell, never even had a reason to." Darius watched her carefully, not with anger, not yet, but with the eyes of someone who knew that no name stayed clean forever. "Then someone wants us to think you did," he said, "which means either you're being set up or we both are." Laya didn't look away. "Either way," she said, "we've just been marked." He nodded, eyes fixed on the blinking red icon on the monitor. The Aston Martin, now sitting in someone else's hands, far more dangerous than when it had left his. They didn't speak again that night, not in a way that counted. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't tense, but it wasn't easy either. Suspicion, once born, doesn't vanish. It lingers, fills the space between words. Later, long after she had gone to her assigned bunk, tablet still in hand, Darius remained in the ops suite. He didn't mention it, didn't press. He waited for the building to fall into its usual rhythm. Lights dimmed. Analysts swapped keyboard clicks for low whispers and late-night coffee. Then he made his move. He accessed the archive. Not case files, not logs, raw surveillance, traffic cams, precinct parking feeds, off-grid city drones no one admitted were still active. He worked alone. 2 hours passed before he found the window of time he needed. 40 more minutes to cross-match angles and timestamps, and then he saw it, buried deep in a mislabeled file flagged for narcotics review. Grainy, slightly distorted, but clear enough. A camera 2 blocks from a West Side precinct had caught the rear parking lot, and in the far corner, a man with his back to the lens. Captain Ree Monahan. Next to him stood two plainclothes officers, but it was the fourth figure that made Darius freeze. A woman, hair tied back, leather satchel, same posture she carried into every briefing. Laya. She wasn't wearing Homeland ID, wasn't on any active roster then, and she wasn't just passing by. She was standing still, square posture, listening. Monahan's hand gestures were sharp, authoritative. It wasn't casual, it was a meeting. Darius didn't blink, didn't breathe too loud, just saved the clip, encrypted it twice, and flagged it under a secure folder. The next morning he said nothing. When Laya returned to the operations room, he didn't flinch, didn't change tone, delivered the daily updates with the same surgical calm as always. But something in him had shifted, something quiet and permanent. At 6:17, the Aston's signal returned. It had been off the grid for hours, lost in what looked like a GPS dead zone, likely shielded by military-grade jamming. Now it was back, parked inside a facility tagged years ago in an inactive Homeland file, flagged as a suspected mid-tier cartel stronghold, one of the clean sites used to house seized vehicles between pickup and resale. The location? Fortified, shielded, hidden behind a dissolved logistics company that no longer legally existed. A drone already hovered overhead, feeding back live images. What they saw stopped the room cold. 3 cartel security trucks parked in formation, armed patrols circling the perimeter, tactical gear, military-style communications, encrypted radios, plate carriers. Everything about them said, this isn't just stolen cars. 2 of the warehouse bay doors were half open. Inside, something far bigger than anyone had expected. Inside the warehouse, the drone feed captured it all. Crates stacked high, forklifts in motion, and right there in the center of the inner dock, untouched, undisturbed, the red Aston Martin. Darius stared at it. It hadn't been stripped, scrubbed, or even moved from where it was last seen. That meant something. They weren't flipping it, they were holding it. And that made it valuable. That made it leverage. That made it bait. They moving it again? Laya asked quietly, her voice calm but coiled. Darius shook his head. Number they're settling in. She frowned. Why stash a car like that in a logistics hub? Because it's proof, he said. They need to show it's still clean, still intact. Someone important's coming to verify it before it disappears for good. She lowered her voice. You think Monahan shows? No, Darius said. Whoever shows up, they won't be bottom rung. This is command level. The decision came quickly. By mid-morning, Homeland and ATF's joint task force was activated. The objective was no longer surveillance, it was containment. Inside a sterile operations room buried 2 floors below ground, agents moved with trained urgency. Maps stretched across the digital table. Entry points, fallback zones, sniper lanes. Every inch of the site had been mapped and cross-referenced. Darius led the briefing. He stood like he always did, straight-backed, surgical in tone, detached but deadly focused. We're not here to box them in, he said. We're here to end it. He outlined the gaps in the perimeter patrols, the timing of the rotations, the likely staging area for high-value cargo. The Aston, he reminded them, was not to be touched. That vehicle is a key witness, he said. Intact, surveillance systems preserved, we get data before paint. And then his voice changed, just slightly. If they resist, we shut it down, no one walks. At the other end of the table, Laya sat silent, her expression unreadable, but the weight between them hadn't faded. When the room cleared and agents filed out, she stayed. Darius stopped beside her. I know what I saw, he said quietly. Her eyes met his. Then you know what I was walking away from. You should have told me. I didn't know I'd have to. That was all they said. Outside, the city kept moving. Traffic pulsed, sirens echoed, and no one on the streets knew that below the surface, a shift was already in motion. Inside Homeland, everything tightened. Weapons were checked with wordless discipline. Tactical teams cycled through final reviews. Coordinates were confirmed, air support rerouted. The facility had been mapped, verified, and matched with historic cartel logistics patterns. It was real, it was active, and they were ready. The official story was routine, a multi-agency narcotics sweep justified by jurisdictional handoff and DOJ oversight. What it really was a clean strike with local PD nowhere near the perimeter. Darius had made sure of that. He wasn't going to give Monahan or anyone under his command a single second to erase what was coming. At 4:42 a.m., Darius stood in the shadows beneath an overpass just 2 blocks from the site. Black tactical gear, comms gear clipped low, sidearm holstered, but not visible. He didn't look like a man leading a charge. He looked like the final result of it. Across from him, Laya adjusted the magazine on her weapon, watching him carefully. "You want the car pulled first?" "No," he replied without looking at her. His eyes stayed on the feed playing in the van. 2 armed guards still outside the warehouse entrance, rifles at the ready. "If we go for the Aston first, they'll know we're not here for drugs. They'll know we're watching them." He turned to her finally. "They don't know, not yet." And then it started. The radio clicked. Once, twice, perimeter in position. Rear gate cleared. Movement green. The van fell silent, save for the whisper of breath inside chest plates and the sound of boots shifting on concrete. Darius checked his earpiece, nodded once, raised his hand. "Go!" The approach was surgical. No shouting, no chaos, just motion. From the side wall, ATF deployed a breaching charge, compressed air and shaped detonation. A pulse, not loud, just enough to make the night snap. Inside the warehouse, lights flared. Voices barked in Spanish, sharp, panicked. Then the crack of gunfire erupted from behind the docks. The firefight was immediate. Muzzle flashes lit crates and scaffolding. Bullets struck steel and fork racks. Sparks burst across the floor like broken fireflies. Darius didn't sprint. He moved like smoke, in and out of cover, between shadow and light, his weapon raised only when precision demanded it. No wasted movement, no wasted time. This wasn't adrenaline. This was execution. Near the mezzanine stairwell, 2 armed men took up defensive position, shouting into radios, drawing fire. But Darius was already behind them. He caught the first guard mid-turn. 2 clean shots, center mass. The second tried to draw, but didn't make it far. By the time either hit the floor, Darius was already gone. "West side clear," Laya's voice cut in over comms, crisp and controlled. "Moving to storage." Darius pressed forward toward the vehicle bay. Half the lights were dead from the breach, leaving the room glowing in pulses of broken fluorescence and blinking red exit signs cutting through the haze. And there it was, the red Aston Martin, untouched, flawless, parked perfectly, like someone had polished it for display in the middle of a war zone. Not a scratch, not a dent, not even dust. It hadn't been used. It hadn't been moved. It had been positioned, ready, visible, waiting. From his left, a shout. Darius spun, dropped low, fired. The guard collapsed across a crate that split open. Forged titles spilling across the floor with counterfeit license plates. Darius kept moving, scanning, watching. He spotted a runner near the far wall, slipping toward a door marked office. Darius broke into pursuit, every step sharp, deliberate, exact. He reached the door just as it began to close, and kicked. Hard. The impact blew it inward, sending the man sprawling backward into a desk covered in burner phones, cash bands, and a vehicle manifest stamped with Shell Company logos. Darius didn't speak, didn't ask. He zip-tied the man's wrists and yanked his comms offline. Laya entered with 2 ATF agents. One scanned the desk. "We'll need this boxed," he said. "Full chain of custody." But Laya wasn't looking at the desk. She was staring at the screen, still on. A live feed, 4 camera angles, warehouse coverage, 1 shot inside the Aston. She frowned. "That's not our feed," she said quietly. "No," Darius replied, stepping closer. "That's theirs." The angle came from inside the rearview mirror. Not Homeland's device, something newer, something hidden deeper. Someone else had been watching this car, watching them. This wasn't just a stash point, Darius said. This was a relay. You think the car was bait? Laya asked. He nodded slowly. I think it still is. Behind them, agents moved through the facility. The gunfire had stopped, the chaos fading into controlled motion, radios chirping, boots on concrete, reports traded in low voices. But the Aston Martin, it sat untouched, immaculate, a silent centerpiece in the center of a trap. Darius approached the car, eyes locked on the glossy reflection in the driver's window. Smoke, red light, the faint flicker of rotating sirens. And in that mirrored glass, for a brief second, he saw himself. Still, weapon lowered, expression unreadable, but something deeper was shifting behind his eyes. Then, more gunfire. Not from inside, from east. Sharp, staggered bursts echoing down the corridor of stacked freight. Darius turned, instincts flaring. The sound wasn't tactical. It was scattered, irregular. A distraction. Someone was using the last seconds of chaos to disappear. He sprinted across the floor, stepping over shell casings and shattered crates. The noise drew him toward the rear, toward a service corridor he knew shouldn't have been touched. The exit wasn't labeled, wasn't on any official map, but he knew it existed because he had authorized the blueprints. The sound of boots on metal stairs echoed up through the hallway. He pushed harder, faster, until he rounded the corner and saw them. 3 men, black gear, moving too clean to be cartel. The tallest turned and fired a short burst. Darius dropped to one knee, returned fire. One clean shot, but the group was already slipping out the maintenance door into the alley. He followed. The air outside bit colder than expected, the silence harsh after the chaos. A black SUV skidded into view from the shadows, tires screaming as it accelerated. Darius reached the alley mouth just in time to see it disappear around the corner. But not before he saw who was inside. Silver hair, square jaw, grinning face. Monahan, Kavanaugh, Heller. He didn't shoot. Not into the dark, not into a moving target already gone. But he didn't lower his weapon either. Laya reached his side seconds later, agents behind her. They got out? She asked, breath clipped. Use the side corridor, Darius said. That wasn't in the floor plans, she replied, eyes narrowing. They knew it was there, Darius said slowly. They knew too well. They didn't guess. They navigated. They used code access exits, internal only. She took a step closer. You're saying someone gave them Homeland schematics? He didn't hesitate. I'm saying someone gave them mine. She opened her mouth. But Darius was already turning, back toward the facility, the car, and the surveillance mirror that had never belonged to them in the first place. They didn't speak until the bodies had been cleared and the building was secured. No more gunfire. No survivors with names that meant anything. Just static on the comms and crates full of weapons traced to cartel caches in Houston and El Paso. No one claimed the Aston. No one mentioned Monahan, Kavanaugh, or Heller. But they had been there. They had run, and they had done it too clean to be lucky. Inside the operations van, the air was dense, thick with tension, blood, and the quiet hum of radios returning to calm. Darius stood with both hands braced against the command table, watching the loop play again overhead, the black SUV disappearing into shadow, the blurred plates, the one frozen frame of Monahan's face lit by the dash just before the feed went dark. Laya stepped inside and closed the door behind her. You think I tipped them? She said flatly. He didn't respond. She took another step forward, arms crossed now, her shoulders rigid. Say it, Darius. You've been carrying it since yesterday. Say it. You met with Monahan before this task force even existed, he said evenly. You accessed black clearance files I never authorized, and the night we execute a raid I personally designed. They escape through internal routes that only someone inside this van would know existed, and that someone is you. You're the only variable. Her voice cracked under pressure now, pain bleeding into fury. Do you hear yourself? You really think I'd spend months beside you, put my life on the line, take bullets with you, just to protect the same bastards we've been hunting? I think you kept things from me, Darius said quietly. And I think this operation has cracks loyalty won't fix. Laya laughed once, short, sharp, bitter. You're not hunting Monahan anymore, she snapped. You're chasing your past. You see your father in every uniform, in every streetlight reflection, in every move I make that doesn't align with your trauma. The words hit harder than any round in the field. Not anger, just pain reshaped. Darius stared at her, eyes narrowing, not in rage, but in something deeper. A quiet betrayal settling into doubt. And what if I am? He said. What if that pain is the only thing keeping me from becoming the same kind of man we're trying to stop? She didn't answer right away. I didn't tip them, she said at last. But someone did, someone with clearance, someone close. He didn't blink. Then we find them, he said. And when we do... He paused. Then we decide who's still standing at the end. The meeting with Internal Affairs wasn't on the record. No dispatch, no scheduling ping, no surveillance triggers. It was arranged through a coded request, buried in a secure archive, encrypted so deeply it required two-step biometric verification and a signal bounce through an international proxy. Only someone who already knew exactly what to ask, and how to ask it, could have gotten through. The cafe didn't look like much. Tucked inside a half-dead industrial park 2 counties out, its sun-faded sign simply read, Gina's, even though no one named Gina had worked there in over a decade. The windows were dusted over, the vinyl booths cracked and faded. Darius sat in the back, facing the door, always. He didn't order anything, he never did here. The man who slid into the seat across from him wore jeans, a windbreaker, and the kind of face that disappeared into any crowd. His name was Paul Hadley, Internal Affairs, one of the last people Darius still trusted when justice and politics started to blur. You look tired, Hadley said, not looking up. Darius didn't smile. You get the files? Hadley reached into his jacket and slid a flash drive across the table. No ceremony, no words wasted. I had to go through the back door for this, he said. Monahan's personnel file? It's not just restricted, it's erased. Darius frowned. Define erased. Hadley leaned in, voice lower now, as in wiped from Homeland's archives. No reports, no commendations, no incident logs, nothing for the last 3 years. It just jumps, from his captain's promotion straight into a blank page. And how did you know something was missing? Darius asked. Because whoever did it was sloppy? They left shadows in the audit trail. There's a time gap that shouldn't exist. Someone tried to scrub the record, but didn't know how to mask the log echoes. Darius stared at him. Who authorized the override? Hadley's expression shifted, just enough. That's the part that'll keep you up at night. Darius didn't flinch. Homeland, Hadley said. Not local, not regional, national level clearance, director grade override. That's the only tier with the authority to ghost a personnel file across multiple federal databases without setting off a single alarm. Darius tapped his fingers slowly on the table. It wasn't the override that got to him. It was the date of it. Whoever buried Monahan did it years ago, which meant the corruption didn't start with the Aston, didn't start with the seizures, didn't start with this op. It started long before. And someone had been protecting it the entire time. You were right to keep this quiet, Hadley said, voice low. But if I were you, I'd start watching the watchers. You think I'm running an op? Darius muttered. Hadley nodded. Number you're inside one. Darius stood, taking the drive without another word. And this time, when he looked toward the door, he wasn't sure who would be waiting on the other side. Darius stepped back into the hallway, the weight of the flash drive heavier than its size allowed. Not because of what it held, but because of what it confirmed. Outside, the sky had darkened, clouds layered thick and low, creeping in slow, ominous waves. The storm hadn't arrived yet, but the air knew it was coming. Someone inside Homeland had cleared Monahan's path, had ghosted his mistakes, had built him a corridor to operate in plain sight, protected from consequence. And the real question now wasn't who had done it. It was who still knew. Hours later, in one of the safe units he rotated every few weeks, Darius sat alone, headphones on, sifting through field audio. Not the polished logs, not the cleaned recordings from raids or interrogations. These were side-channel clips, car rides, stakeouts, debriefs, quiet moments no one thought to redact because no one thought they mattered. Until now. He was halfway through a 6-week-old clip when the phrase dropped, smooth and offhanded, like glass sliding across stone. Focus the narrative, D. You don't control the truth. You shape the part people can live with. He froze the playback. The voice was Laya's, software casual, like she'd said it 100 times before, but it wasn't the words that chilled him. It was where they came from. That line, focus the narrative, was something director Samuel Nash had said often, too often. Nash had once been Darius's mentor, before his promotion, before his name vanished behind black bar orders and sealed operations. And only a few people still quoted him, people who had served under him directly, people who knew exactly what kind of game he played. But Laya had never worked under Nash. At least, she had never said she did, unless she had, unless she was brought in already briefed, already aligned with something deeper, unless she hadn't just been his partner, but something else. A handler, a plant, a distraction. Darius sat back, breath slow, the shape of a new truth starting to take form, one he hadn't wanted to face. Maybe Laya hadn't lied. Maybe she hadn't leaked anything. But there were other ways to be compromised. Proximity, silence, knowing more than you were supposed to, and never admitting it. Outside, thunder rolled faint and far, the kind of sound that makes windows hum. Darius stood, walked to a file cabinet bolted into the floor. He unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out an old dossier, one of Nash's closed cases, flagged years ago. A narcotics investigation that had died without explanation. Back then, it seemed like a failure. Now, with Monahan's name appearing between redactions like a thread woven through the dark, it looked like a blueprint. He opened it. The pages smelled like ink, dust, and quiet betrayal. There, among faded notes and falsified asset logs, he found what he needed. Not a name, not an answer. A code, a single string, printed at the bottom of a personnel audit from 4 years ago. Director authorization, Samuel A. Nash. He stared at it. Not buried, not hidden, just placed in plain sight, counting on no one to ever look. Nash had ordered the wipe on Monahan. He'd used a top-tier override, one reserved for international trafficking cases. On paper, it looked like restructuring. In reality, it cleared the runway for a covert alliance, federal intel in exchange for protected smuggling corridors, career growth in exchange for silence, power traded in shadows. Darius didn't blink. The betrayal didn't burn. It cut cold, precise, like a clean incision reopened with no anesthesia. Nash hadn't just protected Monahan. He had designed the entire ring. Let it fester, let it grow. And Darius? Darius had been the fuse. The Aston, the traffic stop, the raid, the leak that cast suspicion on Laya. All of it orchestrated, not to destroy the ring, but to activate it. Nash hadn't wanted to end the operation. He wanted to force it into motion. And Darius's trauma, his fire for justice, that had been the engine. It had worked. A knock broke the silence. Software once. Darius looked up. Laya stood in the doorway, still, calm, her hands by her sides, her face unreadable. She didn't speak. She just stepped inside, glanced at the open folder on the table, and her eyes landed on the code at the bottom of the last page. She exhaled. "You found it," she said quietly. Darius didn't respond. "You already knew," he said. She nodded, once. I didn't know how far it went, not until today. And you didn't tell me. I couldn't, she said, voice steady but not defensive. I'm embedded. Deep cover, internal affairs, black file assignment. She looked him straight in the eye. My mission wasn't to stop the ring. It was to find out who gave it permission to exist. He didn't move, didn't breathe, but something in his face shifted. Everything he thought he was running wasn't his op anymore, and maybe it never had been. Before you were ever pulled into this, Laya said, her voice steady but low, I already knew something was off. The moment Nash greenlit you for fieldwork again, I knew he wasn't handing you an assignment. He was lighting a fuse. Darius turned toward her now, fury simmering just below his stillness. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut. So you watched, he said. You followed. You listened. You heard them put a gun to my head and pretended you weren't listening for the sound of the trigger. She didn't flinch. I was protecting you, she said. If I stepped in too soon, Nash would have pulled you from the case. Shut it down. You think I enjoyed watching that traffic stop play out? You think I didn't want to rip those cruiser doors off and end it myself? You used me, Darius said, softer now. Not a whisper, heavier, like the weight of it was finally settling. No, she said. Nash used you. I watched because I had to. But I never stopped fighting for you, even when you thought I was the threat. He looked away. The silence fell between them like fog, quiet and suffocating. Everything he'd believed in, the agency, the mission, his own instincts, had been twisted out of shape. But underneath all of it now, something colder, something clearer had taken hold. Purpose. No illusions, no chain of command, just the truth. You still reporting to them? He asked. No, she said. I burned my signal. As far as they know, I'm still monitoring you, but I'm out. And you're sure you're not the only one? If I was, she said quietly, I'd already be dead. They stared at each other. Not allies, not enemies, something raw, something heavier than either. Like survivors of a war they hadn't realized they were fighting on opposite fronts until just now. Darius turned back to the table. Among the documents laid out, one page stood out, a supply ledger linked to a cartel safe house near the southern state line. 2 crates of high-grade counterfeit bills, 1 sat phone bundle, a notation in red ink. Kahaje, Kavanaugh, Heller, Johnson, their logistics runner. They're not gone yet, Darius said, his voice flat, focused, already turning anger into strategy. They're trying to cross the border, using a cabin off Route 18, smuggler's path, cartel codes, forged visas, full escape playbook. They think they're already ghosts, Laya added. They don't know we cracked their runner's uplink. We've got their last trace. They're still vulnerable. Darius closed the folder, eyes narrowing. Then we don't wait. We move now, before Nash burns the rest. Laya nodded. We go quiet. If he catches wind, he'll erase the entire trail, or worse, spin this back on us. Darius clipped his weapon to his hip, grabbed his worn field jacket, the same one that had gotten him through too many black ops to count. No comms, he said. No trackers, no digital trace. We go in, get them, and disappear. Laya followed him to the door. And when we bring them back? She asked. He didn't look at her. Then we make them talk. Outside, the sun had dropped low, shadows stretching long across the concrete like cracks in the surface of the world. For the first time since the Aston was pulled over on a clean city street, Darius felt like he could see the road ahead. They left the city before midnight. For the first 3 miles, they drove without lights. Then they merged onto rural highways, roads with no traffic cams, no patrols, no questions. Above them, the sky was gray and silent, the moon hiding behind cloud cover. The tires hummed soft, the engine lower than a whisper. Darius drove without music, without speaking, his hands steady on the wheel, his mind running every possibility, every shipment, every drop site, every cartel detour they could use to vanish. Laya sat beside him, eyes fixed on a cracked tablet, tracing ghost signals, prepaid phones bouncing off unregistered towers. The cartel didn't use standard burners. They cycled device IDs through Eastern European nodes, rerouted them through Veracruz relays, then injected them into U.S. airwaves using spoofed agri-satellite feeds. But Darius had helped write the playbook. "I'm not seeing blind hops anymore," Laya said, fingers tapping across screens. "They're skimming manifests from old FedEx yards. One burner pinged outside Amarillo 5 hours ago, then again in Wichita Falls. Same device. New SIM. They're riding freight," Darius replied. "Cartel protocol. Not a cop escape. Still getting inside help." "They're stripping SAT tags from shipping data," she said. "That's not amateur work." Then we find the gap they didn't clean fast enough. They reached Wichita Falls just before dawn. The depot was dark, a fence bent back at the corner, cracked pavement, rusted trailers, the kind of place people forgot about on purpose. Inside, only a single light blinked on an emergency panel. A janitor, older, hunched, half asleep, sat in a folding chair with a newspaper and coffee that looked like it had boiled dry. Darius didn't flash a badge, just held out a snapshot of the burner phone's signal pattern. "Did this truck come through last night?" The man squinted through scratched glasses. "Maybe. A lot of trucks come through here." Laya stepped in, no patience left. "You let someone bypass your system." The man's face didn't change, but his eyes flicked toward the office behind him. That was all they needed. Inside the back office, they found it. An old laptop, still logged in, connected to a restricted shipping portal. On the screen, a manifest. Coordinates. Cabin, remote, 2 exits. Cartel tag, 3 days ago. No return manifest. Darius stared at it for a moment, then straightened. They think they're ghosts. He looked at Laya. "Let's remind them what happens when shadows fight back." Bingo! They had the coordinates. Darius and Laya were heading back to the vehicle when they heard it. A voice, raised and angry, cutting across the depot yard like a crack in glass. 2 state patrol officers, young, white, standing beside an unmarked cruiser. One held a clipboard. The other gestured sharply toward a black teenager, no older than 20, zip-tied and sitting on the curb, blood drying along the side of his face. He wasn't resisting, wasn't crying, just stared at the ground like it had betrayed him. "What's this?" Darius asked, already closing the distance. "Routine stop," one officer said flatly. "Car matched a stolen VIN, no ID, no registration." "That your reason for putting hands on a kid?" Darius interrupted, stepping in front of them. "He got mouthy. He got pulled out of a car that belongs to him," Darius snapped. "That's what I see." "Step back, sir." "Badge number," Laya cut in coldly, flashing hers without blinking. The officers hesitated. Darius knelt beside the boy. "What's your name?" "Marcus," the teen said. His voice was rough, from adrenaline, from fear, from pride swallowed too many times. "Marcus Bell." "Where's your registration?" "In the glove box." "You told them that?" He nodded. Darius stood. "Let him go." "Who are you?" one officer asked. "Someone who knows exactly how many complaints are already stacked under your badge number," Darius said, eyes flat. Minutes later, Marcus was uncuffed and sitting in the back of his car, the officers backing away like men who'd suddenly realized the ground beneath them was made of ice. "He just bought it," Marcus said quietly, rubbing his wrists. "Worked 2 jobs, 3 years. Finally made the down payment. Then they roll up like I stole it out of their driveway." Laya looked at Darius. "This is the pattern. Same triggers. Different street." Darius didn't answer. Instead, he handed Marcus a burner phone. "Go home. If anyone comes asking questions, call the number on the lock screen. Don't talk to anyone else." Marcus hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Darius looked at him. "Because I've been where you are, and no one helped me." They dropped him at a diner on the edge of town, paid the cashier to keep an eye on him until his ride arrived, and vanished before he could say thank you. Back in the car, Laya finally spoke. "You okay?" "No," Darius said, "but we're close." They reached the cabin just after sunrise. It sat low in a wooded hollow, flanked by 2 ridges, swallowed by pine. The air around it wasn't quiet. It was too quiet, still. like something waiting to snap. No smoke, no footprints, no movement, not safety. Silence, controlled and deliberate. "They're waiting," Laya murmured. Darius nodded. "Let's knock anyway." They moved through the woods in separate flanks, using the brush like a second skin. Inside that cabin were the last men who could tie Monahan to Nash, the final thread between shadows and names, between theory and proof. This wouldn't be clean. It wouldn't be federal, it would be final. The forest swallowed sound the way oceans swallow light, slowly, hungrily, without apology. Pine needles muted every footstep. The soil was thick and damp, clinging to boots, muffling motion. The trees blocked the sky, the wind, the world. It was like walking through lungs that hadn't breathed in years. Darius moved without rush, not because he was reckless, but because his pace matched the land. He hunted like someone who had been here before. He crept along the southern ridge, crouched under cedar brush. The cabin came into view, roof sagging, chimney black, edges warped with time. But he could hear it. Electricity, the soft, steady hum of power in the conduit. The tension, there was heat inside. And something else, a stillness that wasn't sleep. It was readiness. "They're not in the cabin," Darius muttered into his comms. "They're in the trees." A pause, then Laya's voice. "You sure?" If they were inside, this would already be over. He pulled the earpiece free. No more digital trace. Just instinct now. He moved in a wide arc behind the cabin. 15 yards from the back door, he spotted the first tripwire. Fishing line pulled taut ankle-high across dead leaves, rigged to a buried spike. He stepped over it, then froze. A sound. Too shallow to be wind. Too slow to be a bird. He turned low, quick, a glint of metal, and then, swipe. The blade missed his neck by inches. Kavanaugh exploded from behind a tree, crouched low, combat knife in hand, stance tight and aggressive. No warning, no words, just attack. He slashed again, fast, short arc, meant to disable. Darius caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted hard, and drove his knee into Kavanaugh's ribs. The grunt told him it landed. But Kavanaugh wasn't a rookie. He dropped weight, rolled, used momentum to slam Darius into the nearest tree. The bark tore at Darius's face. He twisted free, staggered, drew his sidearm. But then, crack! A figure slammed into him from the left. Heller, lean, fast. A collapsible baton snapped open in his hand. The strike hit low, thigh muscle, hard enough to numb. Darius dropped to one knee. Heller grinned. "Got you now, don't we, Agent?" Darius didn't blink. He swept his leg out, caught Heller's ankle, and sent him crashing. Rolled, came up fast, and drove. Darius brought the butt of his pistol down across Heller's temple, a dull, satisfying crack echoing through the trees as skin split, and Heller collapsed. Behind him, Kavanaugh was already charging. They collided hard. Darius took the full impact, but stayed on his feet. He let Kavanaugh's weight pass him, pivoted, and drove an elbow down into his spine. Once, twice. Sharp, brutal, final. Kavanaugh dropped to his knees, coughing, spitting blood onto the pine needles. But even wounded, even staggering, he grinned. "You're too late," he wheezed, ribs catching on each word. "You think Nash isn't watching this? Think he didn't plan for it?" Darius stepped back, chest rising with heavy breath, sweat trailing down his spine. "Maybe he did," he said, voice low. "But he's not here." He barely turned in time as Heller, wild and reeling, swung a fist across his jaw. The hit landed, sloppy but strong. Darius stumbled back into the brush, boots skidding across the soil. He hit the dirt, rolled, came up spitting blood, and smiling. "Let's finish this." The ground gave slightly beneath his boots as he charged, breath ragged, body wound tight like a spring let loose mid-air. Heller came first, baton raised, shouting something that didn't matter. that never did. Darius slammed into him shoulder first. They hit the earth hard, a violent tangle of limbs and grit. But Darius mounted fast, knee planted in Heller's sternum, and drove 2 clean punches into his face, one to disorient, one to break. Bone cracked beneath his knuckles. Teeth clicked, blood sprayed. "You think this is justice?" Heller gasped, coughing red. "You're just another angry—" Darius cut him off with a forearm to the jaw, not to shut him up, to remind him talk had always been cheap. This wasn't court. This wasn't press. This was the reckoning. He stood, just as Kavanaugh came barreling in again, limping, bleeding, but swinging a jagged piece of rebar like he meant to end it. The swing came low. Darius ducked, spun, caught the wrist mid-strike, and twisted hard until the rebar dropped. Then he slammed an elbow into Kavanaugh's neck. Once, twice, balance broken, breathing shattered. Darius lifted him off the ground just long enough to drive him spine first into a tree. The bark shook. "Try again," he growled. Kavanaugh roared, stumbling forward with a desperate series of punches, 2 of which landed in Darius's ribs, knocking the wind from his lungs. But Darius didn't back up. He stepped in. Close, violent, personal. A devastating knee into Kavanaugh's inner thigh. A nerve strike. Then a brutal hook to the side of the head that sent him spiraling into the underbrush. He crashed into a fallen log and didn't rise for a full 5 seconds. Darius stepped forward, blood on his teeth, wiping his mouth. "You know what your mistake was?" he asked. Kavanaugh blinked through the haze, coughing. "Not killing you when we had the chance." Darius shook his head slowly. "Number thinking your badge made you untouchable." And then he grabbed him by the collar, rolled him face down, and slammed his wrists into the mud. One hand cuffed him, while the other stayed locked on his spine. Click. The sound of the steel echoed louder than any shot fired that night. Darius stood, breath ragged, blood and sweat streaking his shirt like war paint. Then, movement. Heller crawling through the brush. Desperate, slow, still trying to vanish into the trees like retreat was strategy. Darius caught him with a boot to the ribs, rolled him over, and dropped to one knee, pinning him between the shoulder blades. He didn't speak. Not yet. He let the moment breathe, let Heller feel it. That final second before fate slams the door shut. Then came the cuffs. Cold, tight, clean. Click. The silence that followed stretched across the clearing like a held breath. Darius stepped back, watching, Kavanaugh and Heller squirming on the forest floor. No longer armed, no longer smug. Just 2 men who bet everything on the belief that someone like him would never get this far. He let the silence hang. Then he crouched, slow, close enough for both of them to hear the voice they had once laughed at. It wasn't rage anymore. It was resolution. "You took my car," Darius said quietly. His voice didn't waver, didn't rise. It cut. He leaned in closer. "I took your whole empire." Neither of them spoke. What could they say? The shell companies? Gone. The warehouse network? Gone. The precinct cover? Gone. The Homeland firewall? Cracked. Every wall they'd built had fallen. And the man they mocked, the man they profiled, framed, used as a pawn, was the one who just brought it all down. As Darius fastened the cuffs on the last of them, Laya stepped into the clearing. Rifle lowered, eyes sharp. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She'd heard the line. She'd seen the fall. "You good?" she asked, voice steady. Darius didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, blood-stained, bruised, and then at the 2 men bound at his feet. "Not yet," he said. But his voice was grounded, clear. "Let's bring them in." They left the woods slow, dragging their prisoners through the thinning morning fog. The sky was beginning to lighten, and somewhere overhead, a hawk circled in silence. As the trees parted, the road came into view. Gravel, gray, quiet. The car waited on the ridge. and for the first time in weeks, Darius exhaled. The road ahead would be brutal, but it was his. They didn't speak much on the drive. The prisoners groaned in the back seat, but the bravado was gone. This wasn't an arrest. It was the end. By the time they reached the safe drop outside city limits, Laya had already started decrypting the last data sets, cartel logs, Homeland's mirrored archives, scrubbed files. She had saved them for this moment, when decisions had to be made in silence. Darius stood outside the vehicle as the sun rose behind the skyline, watching, calm. He knew something was ending, not just for him, for the entire structure. "They'll come for us," Laya said without looking up. "Let them," he replied. "We already burned the escape plan." She nodded, then slid the final drive into the relay. One tap. Veritas was activated. A data packet years in the making, bypassing firewalls, skipping clearance queues, going straight to the Office of the Inspector General, the Senate Oversight Subcommittee, every major press outlet with a secure whistleblower line. The files were time-stamped. The calls were recorded. The satellite footage was irrefutable. And Darius's final statement, unfiltered, was embedded. "My name is Darius Avery. I've served Homeland Security for 12 years. I believed in what I was trained to protect. I believed in the system. But the system is broken, not by accident, by design." Within 30 minutes, the ripple became a wave. Local news picked it up. An investigative podcast broke the opening line. By the time national networks caught on, footage of Darius's traffic stop and raids on impound lots played on repeat. Homeland responded fast. They condemned the leak. They suspended Darius, revoked his access, terminated his comms. But it was too late, because before the lockdown even finished, Laya had deployed the secondary kill switch embedded inside a dormant surveillance report. It launched a full cache of Nash's personal emails, burner records, and encrypted chat logs directly to the Inspector General's team. There was no coming back. Darius disappeared. Fake name, rented room, windows blacked out. He didn't watch the news, didn't read the headlines. He didn't need to. The point was never attention. It was truth, slow, hard, and unflinching. Truth that couldn't be hidden again. 2 days later, Leia found him in a safe house above an abandoned auto shop. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but clear. "They're going after Nash," she said. Darius looked up, not surprised, but still burning with quiet intensity. "Criminal or internal?" "Both," she said. "The Senate's called emergency session. Inspector General froze his assets. His burner went dark 8 hours ago. And his move?" She shook her head. "Nothing, not yet." He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, cracked plaster like old road maps branching from an ancient wound. Like the system itself, he exhaled slowly. Not in relief, not in surrender, but like a man finally breathing on his own terms. "You did it," she said. Not as praise, as fact. He didn't smile, didn't shift. "No," he replied. "We started it. Because it was never just about Nash. He was a symptom, not the disease. But the crack in the wall, that breach, was wide enough now for others to see through. When Monahan went down, it was quiet. No press, no statement. But the charges were federal and devastating. Racketeering, falsifying warrants, obstruction, abuse of power. He didn't fight it. When the folders on his laptop were opened and auction trails traced across 5 states, he stopped talking. The accomplice list reached into precincts once thought clean. Suspensions spread through Chicago, Dallas, Detroit. In some departments, captains flipped on each other to cut deals. Old case files vanished, then reappeared in reporters' hands. The blue wall didn't fall from protest. It fell from proof. Kavanaugh and Heller, tried separately, sentenced together. Body cams, testimonies, citizens they once brutalized took the stand. The traffic stop footage played during closing arguments. One cried, the other just stared at the floor. 30 years, no parole, no badge, just numbers and concrete. And Nash? He tried to flee, but a travel hold had been filed 2 hours earlier. His plane stopped in Bermuda to refuel. Federal marshals boarded in silence. No fight, just a man in a suit who no longer looked untouchable. Now he faces federal racketeering charges, and this time, the cameras won't look away. Darius testified before Congress, under protection, plain suit, plain words, calm fire. He spoke about being used, not just as bait, but as a symbol, about being told justice existed while watching it auctioned off behind closed doors. And when he walked out of that chamber, he wasn't just a survivor. He was a witness who refused to be forgotten. Later, they returned to the impound lot. Rust on the gates, oil in the air. But this time, no secrets, no schemes, just history. And there it was, the red Aston Martin, repainted, cleaned, whole. It didn't shine the same way. It didn't need to, because now it wasn't bait. It wasn't a symbol of theft. It was what survived. He didn't speak as he took the keys. Didn't need to. Laya stood beside him, arms folded, quiet. "They replaced every wire you touched," she said. "Still ours," he replied. "Still means something." He drove slow, through the city, through the neighborhoods that raised him, tested him, judged him. People recognized the car. Some recognized him. A kid raised a fist. Darius nodded back, small smile, window down. He passed the street where it all began, where red lights turned to blue and power mistook skin for guilt. He didn't park, didn't rage. He just looked, then kept driving. They offered him an office, 3rd floor, city view. He declined. Instead, he built a team. Started with 5, then 10. No favors, no insiders, no politics. Just truth seekers, from every background, every city. Laya stood beside him on launch day. No mission statement? "We don't chase crime," he said. "We chase the rot from the inside out." That became their creed. Not painted, not spoken. Lived. By the time Nash was indicted, reporters called Darius a whistleblower with teeth. But he didn't take interviews. Didn't chase fame. The mission was never to be seen. It was to see clearly, even when no one else would. And months later, just before dawn, he returned to the Overlook. The same one he once visited after his first federal win. The Aston parked quiet. The city lights blinked beneath him. He stepped out, let the cold hit his skin, looked out at a world that finally knew his name, and what he'd done with it. He didn't smile big, just enough. Not because justice was perfect, but because for once, it didn't blink, and that was enough.